Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Morning comes, but it doesn't bring relief. It brings noise. The rain has eased, the sky is brighter, and the village wakes up like it always does. Except today, it wakes up hungry for answers. People gather in little clusters near the grandparents' yard, whispering and pointing at the banana grove like it's the center of the universe. You hear the same theories repeated over and over like a chorus nobody can shut off. Maybe she slipped into the ditch. She must have gotten lost in the rice field. Storms make people panic. Maybe she ran and didn't know where she was going. It's the kind of talk that sounds logical when you say it fast, until you actually look at what's in front of you. James hasn't slept. Not even a minute. His clothes are still damp, his eyes look bruised, and his voice is raw from shouting her name all night. He keeps moving, like if he stops, he'll collapse, and he can't afford to collapse. He goes back to the backyard first, again and again, scanning the mud like it's a map. There are footprints everywhere now because half the village walked through the yard to help. But James is trained by panic to see patterns. And the more he searches, the less the accident theory makes sense. Because if Diep fell into a ditch, there'd be chaos in the tracks. Slipping, stumbling, marks that spiral in confusion. But what he finds is different. The prints that matter, what's left of them, aren't tangled. They're directional. They lead, not wander. They go as if someone knew exactly where they were going, even in the dark, even in the rain. Like someone guided her. Like someone walked her down a path they'd walked before. James looks out toward the field, then toward the canal road, then back at the house. His stomach twists because he hates what his brain keeps suggesting. This wasn't random. This was local. This was somebody who knew this village like their own skin. He's about to head out again when Ly runs to him. She's barefoot, hair messy, cheeks streaked from crying. She's still wearing the same shirt she slept in, except now she's clutching one of Diep's shirts, pressed tight against her chest like it's oxygen. James kneels and pulls her close, but Ly immediately starts shaking her head like she's trying to shake off the memory. "I told you," she whispers, voice small and cracked. "I saw someone carry Mom." "I know," James says, steadying her. "I believe you." She swallows hard. Her eyes are red, swollen, exhausted, but there's something else in them too. Something adults keep ignoring because it's inconvenient. Detail. She leans in like she's afraid the village will hear her and punish her for speaking. "I heard a motorbike," she says, "not like Uncle's bike. It was loud. Loud like boom boom, like a bad exhaust." James freezes. He grips her shoulders gently. "You heard it?" Ly nods fast, desperate. "Yes, when the lights were out. I heard it far, then close, then far again." That one tiny detail slices through all the maybe she fell stories like a blade. Because a motorbike means movement. A motorbike means someone didn't just stumble around in a storm. A motorbike means someone came prepared to take someone away. James stands up so fast his knees ache. "Stay with Grandma," he tells Ly, forcing calm into his voice. "Don't leave the house." "But Dad, I'll come back," he promises, even though he has no idea what back looks like right now. He runs straight to the commune office. The building is small, plain, the kind of place that moves at its own slow pace no matter how urgent life outside becomes. James bursts in dripping mud and fear, and for a second, everyone stares like he's breaking some invisible rule about how loudly you're allowed to suffer in public. "I need to report a kidnapping," he says, words tumbling out. "My wife is missing. Taken last night during the blackout. We found drag marks, and my daughter heard a motorbike with a loud exhaust." The people inside exchange looks. One stands, another sits back down. Someone reaches for a form like the form is a shield. "Calm down," a man says, already writing. "We need to verify first." James's jaw tightens. "Verify what?" "She's gone. Sir, the man repeats, slow and official. We have procedures. We need the family information. We need a written statement. We need... James slams his palm on the counter, not even trying to be polite anymore. While you're doing paperwork, my wife could be... He stops himself before the sentence turns into something he can't take back. He inhales, forces his voice lower. Please, just send someone to check the canal road, check the brick kiln area, check the abandoned sites. The words abandoned sites make the room go quiet for a second. People in villages know what that means. They know where trouble hides. The officer writes, still calm, still distant. We will record your report. Then we will coordinate. Coordinate, verify, procedure. James feels like he's screaming underwater. By the time he leaves, he has signed his name on papers that don't feel like help. He steps outside and sees the village road glittering with leftover rain, and he wants to punch the sky. Back at the grandparents' house, the energy has shifted from panic to gossip. People are helping, but their help is noisy. Too many opinions, too many directions, too many adults trying to turn a nightmare into a story that fits their comfort. Ly sits on a low bench near the doorway, clutching Diep's shirt so hard her knuckles are white. Every time someone says, "She probably fell," Ly flinches like she's being slapped. James returns and crouches by her. Did you tell Grandma about the motorbike? Ly nods. They said, maybe I dreamed it. James's stomach twists again. He looks up at the adults in the yard. Some are searching. Some are pretending to search. Some are just watching. And he realizes something terrifying. If the person who took Diep is from here, then they're watching too. And then something happens that changes everything. That afternoon, when the household is exhausted and the searching is starting to feel like running in circles, James finds a folded piece of paper slipped under the front door. No envelope, no name, just paper. His hands go cold before he even opens it, like his body recognizes danger faster than his eyes do. He unfolds it slowly. 4 words, written in dark, blunt handwriting. If you want your wife to live, sign. Under it is another sheet. Handwritten, neat, legal-looking enough to be taken seriously. It's a document transferring a piece of ancestral land to Diep's name. James stares at it like his brain refuses to translate. Land? Not money. Not ransom. Land. And then he remembers the dinner, the sarcasm, the ancestral property is sensitive comment, the way the room tightened. This isn't a random kidnapping. This is coercion. This is someone using family law and village honor like a weapon. James's head pounds. His mouth tastes like metal. Because land in a hometown isn't just land. It's history. It's pride. It's inheritance. It's grudges that people carry for decades without ever saying the real reason out loud. And someone is trying to force Diep to agree so it looks clean on paper, so nobody can sue, nobody can accuse them, nobody can call it theft. They can claim she signed willingly. James turns the page over, hoping for a clue. Nothing. No location. No name. Just the demand. His heart kicks hard, and for the first time, he feels something sharper than fear. Rage. He storms into the house and locks the door without thinking. People protest, confused, but he doesn't care. He holds the paper up. Who did this? He says, voice low and shaking. Who would come to this house today and slide this under the door? Silence. Not innocent silence. The kind of silence where people know more than they're saying. And while James is standing there in that room full of relatives, surrounded by faces, he suddenly doesn't trust. Diep wakes up somewhere else. It's dim. The air smells like damp wood and old smoke. Her wrists burn. She tries to move and realizes her hands are tied behind her back with rough rope. Tight enough to hurt, but not tight enough to cut. Whoever did this knows exactly how much pain to use. Her mouth is uncovered. That hits her like a second wave of fear, because if they wanted to keep her quiet, they would have gagged her. They don't want her quiet. They want her to talk. She blinks, fighting panic, and looks around. It's an old shack. Broken planks, dusty corners, a few stacked bricks like someone used to store things here and then abandoned it. Through a crack in the wall, she sees a tall chimney shape in the distance. An old brick kiln. Abandoned. The kind of place people avoid. The kind of place where screams don't travel far. Footsteps crunch outside. Diep's breath catches. She forces her face to stay still, to stay calm, because she knows something important. If she looks weak, they'll crush her. If she looks too strong, they'll punish her. The door creaks. A shadow steps in. A voice, low, familiar enough to chill her blood, says, "You just need to say yes, Diep. That's all." Diep swallows, throat tight. "Where is my daughter?" The shadow pauses. And then, like a knife pressed gently against skin, the voice answers, "Don't make us bring Nye into this." That one sentence makes Diep's whole body go cold. Not because it's loud, not because it's dramatic, but because it's precise. It tells her exactly what they're willing to do. Her wrists ache behind her back, rope biting into skin. But it's nothing compared to the tremor that hits her chest when they say Nye's name like a warning instead of a child. Diep forces air into her lungs, slow, quiet. She keeps her eyes steady on the shadow near the door, even though her instincts are screaming to look away, to curl up, to disappear. "Where am I?" she asks, voice rough but controlled. The person doesn't answer directly. They step closer, and Diep catches a smell. Wet raincoat, cigarette smoke, mud. Familiar countryside smells. The kind you can't wash off in one night. "You know this place," the voice says. "You grew up here." Diep's stomach twists. The words are meant to unbalance her, to remind her that she's trapped inside her own history. Another voice speaks from outside the shack, higher, impatient. "Stop talking. We don't have time." The first voice lowers again, almost gentle. "Listen, no one wants to hurt you, but we need you to cooperate." Diep stares. Cooperate with what? A paper rustles. Someone sets something down in front of her. She can't see it clearly in the dim light, but she sees the shape of pages, the edge of a folder. "You sign," the voice says. "You say you signed willingly. That's it. Then you go home." Diep's lips part slightly. "Land." The voice doesn't deny it. "Ancestral land. It should have been handled properly a long time ago." Diep laughs once, dry, bitter, disbelieving. "So you kidnapped me to handle it properly?" The shadow shifts, annoyed now. "Don't use that word. This is not kidnapping. This is solving a problem." Diep's heart thuds. "You dragged me through mud in the dark, tied my hands, threatened my daughter. What would you call it?" Silence. Then the voice says, "Colder. Careful." Diep bites the inside of her cheek until she tastes blood. Her mind races, grabbing onto one clear thought. They left her mouth uncovered for a reason. They want her to speak on record. They want her to say the magic words. "Yes, I agree. I signed voluntarily." Because if she agrees, it becomes clean. It becomes legal looking. It becomes a story that can survive a court. And suddenly Diep understands the worst part. They didn't just take her body. They're trying to steal her voice. Cut back to the village. James is still holding that paper like it's radioactive. The house feels smaller than before. Every face looks like a mask. The relative who made those sarcastic comments at dinner is suddenly very quiet, busy doing nothing, eyes never meeting James's. James steps toward them. "You mentioned land last night." The relative blinks slowly. "Everyone talks about land." "No," James says, voice sharp. "You didn't talk. You hinted." The older aunt tries to calm him down. "James, don't accuse people. We're family." James turns his head so fast the aunt flinches. My wife is missing. Don't tell me about family like it's a blanket. He looks back at the paper, rereads the line. If you want your wife to live, sign. His hands shake, but his mind is starting to clear in a way that feels terrifying. They want him to sign something, but the document isn't even in his name. It's transferring ancestral land to Diep's name, meaning the land is currently tied up, maybe under someone else, maybe under the family elders, maybe split into pieces nobody agreed on. And the only way to shift it cleanly is to make it look like Diep requested it or accepted it herself. And someone is using Diep's disappearance to force that outcome. James looks at Ly. She's sitting very still now, watching him with that exhausted, frightened focus kids get when they realize adults are lying. Baby, he says softly, kneeling. Tell me again about the motorbike. Ly swallows. I heard it, loud, like angry. Did you see it? Ly shakes her head. Too dark. But I heard it go away. James nods slowly. That means Diep wasn't taken far on foot. That means there's a route, a place, the brick kiln, the canal road, any abandoned shack near a path a motorbike can reach. He stands up and faces the adults again. I'm taking Ly with me, grandmother gasps. Where? Anywhere I go, James says. She stays with me. Grandmother reaches for Ly, panicked. No, James, it's dangerous. James's voice breaks for a second. It's dangerous here too. And that's the truth nobody wants to say out loud. If the kidnappers are close enough to slip a note under the door in broad daylight, then the house is not safe. If they're bold enough to use Ly's voice to lure Diep outside, then they're not afraid of hurting a child emotionally. James looks at everyone. If any of you knows something, he says, quiet, deadly, now is the time. No one speaks. Not because they know us, they know nothing. Because speaking would break the village's favorite rule. Don't expose family shame. James exhales, and the air shakes. Fine, he says. Then I'll do this my way. Cut back to Diep. They untie one wrist just enough to let her hold a pen. Not free. Never free. One man stands behind her, ready to yank her back if she tries anything. Another holds the papers in front of her. The voice says, just sign. Say you agree. We'll let you go. Diep stares at the paper. Her eyes skim the lines. It's written to look official, but there's desperation in the handwriting. Rushed, careful, like someone copied from a template. Diep swallows. Her brain is doing two things at once, fear and strategy. Fear is screaming, say yes, go home, hug Ly. Strategy is whispering. If you say yes, they'll keep doing this forever. If you say yes, you'll be trapped. She forces herself to speak evenly. If I sign, I want to call my husband. 1 minute. Speaker. So I know my daughter is safe. The men laugh, short and cruel. No calls. Diep's heart sinks, but she keeps her face calm. Then bring Ly here so I can see her. You want me to sign? Fine. Let me see my child first. The first voice leans in close. Don't test us, Diep. Then they say it again. Ly's name. Like they're tapping a gun to her temple without ever showing the weapon. Diep's hands start to shake and she hates it. She hates that her body betrays her. She bites down hard on her fear. You can threaten me all day, she whispers, but if you touch my daughter... The man behind her jerks the rope, yanking her shoulders back. Pain flashes. Enough, someone snaps. You sign or you don't go home. Diep closes her eyes for half a second and pictures Ly's face, wet with tears, whispering mom in the dark. Her breath catches. She opens her eyes and looks at the pen like it weighs 1,000 kilos. Cut back to James. He reads the note again. The message is simple, but it contains a hidden truth. They believe he can be pressured through honor and legality, not through money, through shame, through the idea that if he handles it quietly, Diep comes back, and the village returns to normal. No police, no scandal, no public embarrassment. James realizes the kidnappers are betting on him choosing silence over justice. And for a moment, he almost understands why people do. But then, he looks at Ly. Her small hands are still gripping Diep's shirt. Her eyes are swollen, but there's a hard little spark in them too. She's watching him, trusting him to be the adult who doesn't lie. James's chest tightens. He can't teach his daughter that fear controls you. He can't teach her that family threats win. So, he decides to take a risk. Not because it's safe, because it's the only move left. He tells the local officer, "I got a note. They want a signature." The officer's eyes sharpen. "Show me." James hesitates, because trust is dangerous now. But he shows it anyway. "They want land transferred, not money." The officer frowns. This is complicated." James almost laughs again. "That's the point. They're hiding behind complicated." The officer says, "Don't act alone. We can try to—" James interrupts. "If I wait, she dies." The officer doesn't deny it. He just looks at James with the grim understanding of someone who's seen bad things happen in small places. James breathes out. "I'm going to pretend to sign." The officer stiffens. "James, I'm not giving them what they want," James says. "I'm buying time. I need a meeting point. I need to see who shows up." He looks down at Ly. "And she comes with me." The officer starts to protest, but James's face is set like stone. "I'm not leaving her anywhere." That evening they arrange it. James takes the papers, takes a pen, takes Ly. He walks toward the agreed drop point, near the old canal road, while the officer and a couple men stay hidden at a distance, trying to be invisible in a place where everyone knows everyone. The sky is gray again, threatening more rain. The fields are quiet in a way that feels wrong. Ly holds James's hand so tight, his fingers go numb. "Dad," she whispers, "are we going to see Mom?" James's throat tightens. "We're going to bring her home." They reach the spot, a small clearing near the path, mud still wet, grass bent down from last night's storm. James places the papers on a low rock like the note instructed. He waits. Seconds stretch into minutes. Wind moves through the reeds like whispering. Then footsteps. A figure appears from the trees, hood up, face hidden. Another shadow moves behind them, watching, guarding. The first figure points at the papers. "Sign." James picks up the pen. His hands are steady now, not because he isn't afraid, because fear has turned into focus. He leans over and signs. The figure snatches the paper and scans it. Then, they lift their head and say something that makes James's blood run cold. "No, not like that." James freezes. "What?" The figure taps the signature line. "It has to match." "Match what?" James asks, voice tight. The figure's eyes glint under the hood. "Exactly as required." And in that moment, James understands the final layer of the trap. They didn't decide this last night. They prepared for this. They already had a required signature in mind. Already had a reference, a sample, a plan. Meaning, someone has been watching them long before they came back to the village. Meaning Diep's disappearance wasn't triggered by the storm. The storm was just the cover. James's heart pounds as the figure steps closer. Ly squeezes his hand, trembling, and the episode ends with James staring at that hooded face, realizing he's standing inside a plan that started long ago, and he's only just stepped onto the board. The next morning, the village erupts with theories. Some claim Diep fell into a ditch or got lost in the rice fields. But James notices the tracks aren't chaotic. They're directed, as if someone led her along a familiar path. At the commune office, he faces slow procedures and wait for verification, while Ly repeats one key detail. She heard a motorbike with a loud exhaust during the blackout. That afternoon, a note is slipped under the door. If you want your wife to live, sign. Alongside a handwritten land transfer document placing ancestral property in Diep's name. The same topic hinted at during dinner. Meanwhile, Diep wakes tied in an abandoned shack near a brick kiln. Her mouth is uncovered because they want her to say yes voluntarily. When they threaten Ly, Diep trembles. James risks a fake signing to buy time, but learns the signature must match a preset, required version. Proof this trap was planned long ago.